I'm Larry Weeks, and this is Bounce. Conversations about challenge, whether personal or corporate. I try to suss out the tools, tips, or systems that can help us handle them.
It's your beliefs about the thought. Can you leave it alone? Can you wait until tomorrow to worry? Can you postpone your worry if you want to? Is it a good idea to worry, or do you think it's a bad idea? You think it's good for my, I have control over my health. I need to spend 10 hours worrying, otherwise I won't be able to detect any illness in time and so on. So you have these positive beliefs about the usefulness of worry. And then you might also have the uncontrollability belief. You don't have a choice about the worry time. You want them to self-regulate. And that is really what we're going for, self-regulation. And the only way to make thoughts and feelings self-regulate is to not working on regulating them at all.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Bounce Podcast. I've had a horrible cold for the last week, so please forgive my froggy voice and my occasional cough. As a person who overthinks, I relish practices like bike rides, long walks, meditation, any activity that disengages my chatterbox of a brain. I'm prone to rumination, which is a wonderful capacity for ideas or problem solving, but can quickly become a hammer looking at everything as if it's a nail. And this can lead not only to paralysis by analysis, but also insomnia, excessive worry, and negative moods. My guest on this episode is Dr. Pia Callesen, who explains how to use metacognitive strategies to break free from this overthinking. Dr. Callesen is a therapist and metacognitive specialist managing several clinics in Denmark. She has a Ph.D. from Manchester University, and she is the author of Live More, Think Less. And her study into the effectiveness of metacognitive therapy for depression, published in Scientific Reports in 2020, suggests that MCT has considerable benefits which can exceed those of CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. Metacognitive therapy, and I'm excerpting here from Science Direct, has been described as a paradigm shift in psychotherapy. It was developed by Adrian Wells, and it's based on information processing theory and the self-regulatory executive function model. The treatment has been cited in National Health Services guidelines in the UK as a treatment to consider for generalized anxiety. So metacognition is how we think about thinking. This is a form of therapy based on doing less, not more, with your thoughts and feelings. So let me give you an example pulled from Pia's book. And we're all familiar with this kind of tip of the tongue phenomenon. We get a sense of we're trying to remember either a name of a favorite song, or we're doing a crossword puzzle, and we need to find the word for, let's say, green gemstone. Okay, man, what's that called again? I know it. We know the word, but for some reason we can't retrieve it from our memory. How can we know that we know the answer, but yet be unable to think of it? This is metacognition. Your brain has an overview of the knowledge library it contains, even if we can't access it right away, in order to kind of pull from that knowledge. Some people will try to concentrate harder, which is a form of rumination, trying to rummage through the stored knowledge by putting all the energy into thinking about the name of the green gemstone. Others will use a kind of layered or structured strategy, like reviewing the entire alphabet. I do this, right? A, B, C, in an attempt to find that name. Now, often, I think we've all experienced this, the best strategy is actually do as little as possible. Just let the question sit there until some level of our mind has dived into the archives for the answer itself. And later, maybe a few minutes later, or we're out for a walk or whatever, it will hit us. Jade. Jade is the green gemstone. The point being, most answers and solutions to our questions don't show up because we ruminate. We're going at it directly with a lot of effort. According to Dr. Callesen, our metacognition can do the work completely automatically. This is the self-regulation aspect of our conversation in metacognition. So how does this apply to negative thoughts or stressful thoughts? If we use all our mental powers to ruminate, according to Dr. Callesen, we risk maintaining the negative thoughts. They grow stronger. We get tangled up with those thoughts, thereby making our mood even worse. So this is a bit of oversimplification, maybe, but it's best to let our thoughts be. And that's what we talk about on this episode. Just passively observe the flow of thought. It's not the number of unpleasant experiences or negative thoughts that leads to a very negative mood, anxiety, depression. It's the focus as the primary cause. It's the amount of attention we give our thoughts and problems. Simply put, we ruminate ourselves into depression or we worry ourselves into anxiety. Okay, with that said, this is what the show is about. And I discussed that with Dr. Callesen. We define metacognition, metacognitive therapy. We talk about metacognitive beliefs, the discovery of self-regulating mechanisms in the brain, how metacognitive therapy differs from CBT in targeting specific psychological processes. How do you postpone worry or rumination? I mean, easier said than done, right? We talk about attention training. We talk about detached mindfulness and the benefits and risks of practicing mindfulness and meditation in conjunction with metacognitive therapy. And that's around the goal-seeking function, the problem with that. So without further ado, I give you Dr. Pia Callesen.
Thank you for joining and coming on. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation. I'm honored that you want to speak to someone from Denmark.
I wanted you on because I was trying to locate someone who does metacognitive therapy and or has written about the subject or is a thought leader. You're currently in practice, right? You have a practice.
I have a large clinic with 25 psychologists, and they're either in the way of becoming metacognitive specialists. There's a 2-year program, a masterclass that you can, where Professor Adrian Wells is teaching because he's the one who developed it. And I was a Ph.D. student with him, so I have had a lot of supervision with him and been under his wings for many years. So, and I'm a supervisor myself now on this masterclass. So I would say that, yes, I'm pretty good at metacognitive therapy. I was wondering if you were, this book, Live More, Think Less, that you came across is actually out in Britain, England, Australia, and so on. It's actually quite international, but it's a very small subject. And as you say, there's not many people who are educated in this. It's a new paradigm, and there's no one in the United States. There's one in Australia. There's one in New Zealand. So it's like very, very small. Maybe there's 150 in Norway, but then there's 10 in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands. So they are like situated. And in Denmark, we are 80 people who are have this certification.
Has it had a wider adoption in Europe than the US?
Yeah. That's because Adrian Wells is doing this program with a Norwegian professor called Hans Nordahl. So he sends all his students, all the Norwegian students from Trondheim on the program. So that's because of their collaboration that there's a lot of Norwegian, Swedish, Danish people enrolled. So it's a Scandinavian thing and a little bit European thing. There's some people in Germany who can do it, and across Europe, but it hasn't reached America yet.
Why do you think that's a cultural thing, or do you think the ACT protocol is taking its play or doing something similar?
ACT is huge. ACT is huge. Yeah, well, it's similar, but it's not as evidence-based, and the results are not as magnificent as metacognitive therapy. So it's a matter of time. At the moment, they're doing because they're doing an online masterclass now, a 2-year program, and I believe there's 4 or 5 American students on that one. So in 2 years they will be. So you have certified therapists in 2 years or so.
Okay. So I'm a tennis player. I just want to throw this at you. So I play tennis and I'm a meditator. There is a little technique when you start losing your cool to say no feeling after a point. So the little thing you rehearse, you say no feeling after a point. So you don't celebrate if you win a point, and you don't ruminate or criticize yourself if you lose a point. You try not to get upset either way. The problem with that is you can't stop a feeling. You're going to feel it's automatic.
Exactly.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I was going to say there's something wrong with that one.
So, right. Yeah. So in my meditation practice, there is a noting technique. When you meditate, you say hearing, feeling, seeing. There's certain techniques. There's a lot of techniques like that. So I added this little thing. If I lost a point and I felt bad, I feel it immediately. I would say feeling, no label. So I would just tack on no label. So I'm trying to stop myself from interpreting the feeling and having the thoughts about the feeling, if this makes sense.
Yeah, it's still doing something with thoughts.
It's still, yes, but it's working a lot more than the other one. So I was trying to figure out why is this working for me? And it's because I'm not running with the thoughts. They certainly want to come. So with that as the launching board, first for our audience, because it's intimidating, the terminology of metacognitive therapy. It sounds metaphysical, or it sounds very, very complicated, right? So tell us what metacognition is. And I think obviously it's thinking about thinking, but tell me if that fits the definition or that.
Thinking about thinking, yes, exactly. So when you have a trigger situation, it could be internal, like an emotion, or it could be external trigger situation. You would have a thought. You would have some trigger thoughts. That's very normal. So if you're losing in tennis, you would have trigger thoughts. If you have an emotion you don't like, you'd have trigger thoughts. And so you have some beliefs about those thought handling. You either believe that you can leave the thought alone if you want to. You don't believe you can leave the thought alone. It's uncontrollable. Or you believe it's useful. So you can have some metacognitive beliefs about how to handle this thought and what are the good strategies and the bad strategies. And what strategies can I choose? Can I leave the thought alone? Is that an option, really? So you have some beliefs about thoughts, what they are, and if they should be handled or not, and if you have a choice about handling them. And all these beliefs about thoughts are metacognitive beliefs, and that's what we work on in metacognitive therapy.
Oh, okay, so it's the aspect of what you think about thoughts or thinking about thinking.
What you think about your thoughts. Example, you have OCD and you think, if I have pedophilic thoughts, I will become a pedophilic person. I will, I will attack children if I don't control this thought. So you believe the thought is dangerous. If you have OCD, for example, you believe a violent thought of killing your partner, whatever, is a dangerous thought, because
if I have health anxiety, I'm going to have a heart attack. And here it comes.
That could be, if you have a health anxiety OCD, you believe that the thoughts can kill you, but you might also believe that you can't control how much time you spend on your health anxiety thoughts. So if you have a trigger thought, let's say you feel something in your body and you think, it's cancer, or is this dangerous? Then you might think, I can't control how much time I spend worrying about this thought. I can't control it. It's not under my control if I spend half an hour, if I spend 10 hours. I just worry. It's uncontrollable. So it's
not the thought itself. Okay, I'm going to have a heart attack. So I'm feeling tightness across my chest. I'm going to have a heart attack, even though you don't, and this is repeated. It's not the thought.
No, it's your beliefs about the thought. Can you leave it alone? Can you wait until tomorrow to worry? Can you postpone your worry if you want to? Is it a good idea to worry, or do you think it's a bad idea? You think it's good for my, I have control over my health. I need to spend 10 hours worrying. Otherwise, I won't be able to detect any illness in time, and so on. So you have these positive beliefs about the usefulness of worry. And then you might also have the uncontrollability belief. You don't have a choice about the worry time. So you're in a dilemma. You are ambivalent in a way.
Yes. Are these both conscious and subconscious?
Well, they are conscious, and you can easily get hold of them in therapy. I would ask patients, how
I'm assuming in the moment. I mean, in the moment of
They would know. They'd say, I don't have control. I can't control it. They will verbalize how uncontrollable this worry feels and so on. So they are much aware of it, but they haven't really been asked these questions before on a meta level in this way.
Okay. So this is a form of therapy based on really doing less, not more, with how you're thinking and your feelings.
Less is more. Exactly, yeah.
Less is more.
Because you want them to self-regulate. And that is really what we're going for, self-regulation. And the only way to make thoughts and feelings self-regulate is to not working on regulating them at all.
Okay.
So you want to do less is more, as Adrian Wells says, doing nothing is doing everything. You want to do as little with the thought as possible.
Very interesting. So I'm glad you mentioned self-regulating. So let's talk about that. So there's a signal sent to the brain that leads to feeling distressed or whatever, right? The signal, it might be short, or I think the theory of self-regulation is it's short. So you have these uncomfortable feelings, but they don't last long in the human mind. We may think they will, but we prolong it. We prolong these uncomfortable feelings with whatever unhelpful coping strategy we have. So that means the feelings are going to last longer in the mind. And is the theory then that self-regulating means the brain is able to kind of process it itself on its own, and
Exactly.
and it will pass if we leave them alone.
Yes. So the intrusion will pass, the negative emotion will pass, the negative thought will pass if we don't work on it and if we don't fight it. And any fight is really bad in metacognitive therapy. It's pushing it away, it's dwelling on it, ruminating, any active. So it's like lazy therapy. You want to be as lazy as possible to leave it alone to self.
You're wrestling with a pig, you're going to get dirty.
Yeah. So you want to be lazy. You just want to observe and then wait for it to self-regulate.
So there doesn't seem any room in that therapy or that concept for any kind of cognitive behavioral strategies. There doesn't seem any room. So in other words, thought disputing or, hey, that's irrational.
No, that would be the bad thing. That would be doing something. That would be prolonging the thought if you work on it with rational thinking and restructuring. I did that a lot for the first 10 years when I was a CBT therapist.
So there's no room for that. How about downstream?
If you want to get rid of your depression, I mean, if you want the shortest way out of depression and anxiety and disorders, you don't want to prolong them. So the theory here is that these prolonged disorders are only prolonged normal fluctuations. So you'd have a bad day. If you don't want that to develop into depression, you want to leave it alone. If you have an anxiety attack and you don't want to develop this to panic attack, you want to leave it alone. So if you don't want disorders, diagnosis, the best strategy is leaving these emotions and thoughts that will appear alone, so you don't hold on to them and prolong them to a diagnosis.
Okay. So let's say once we're clear of the negative emotion or our emotions aren't as high, let's say we're at a 10 scale, right? Where I'm freaking out. I've let it alone. Yeah. And we're going to talk about the techniques here because we're going to need help. Yeah. That I'm sure leaving it alone is not an easy thing. So with that said, let's say we do it and now I'm calm, I'm fine. Is there any benefit in me looking at some of the cognitive behavioral labeling of thoughts, predicting, emotional reasoning? Is there any benefit in learning what those are as to what my mind's doing? Or is there any benefit in knowing the various irrational thoughts that can pop up during those emotional swings?
The goal in metacognitive therapy is seeing that you can leave a thought alone and impact alone, a trigger thought, independent of its content. So you don't need to know the content to learn that you can choose to leave this alone. So it wouldn't give you any insight. I mean, of course you can know yourself better. Okay, I get these trigger thoughts but it doesn't really change. You need to see that you can leave them alone, independent if it's that kind of negative thought on that. Sometimes they're realistic. Sometimes it's not. It's a real thought. Maybe you had cancer and you have a risk of dying. I mean, sometimes these thoughts are not irrational. They can be true.
Well, this is very interesting because I think when I was reading about metacognitive therapy, I was trying to fit it in with all the other therapies as some kind of rubric here. And what's interesting, I thought it was specifically dealing with the rumination part or the extended part of negative thinking. It sounds like it's pretty much on a continuum at any level, whatever the depression, anxiety.
So we have mixed groups, online mixed groups in English too, but we have people with PTSD, anxiety, depression, and so on. Wow. And they use different strategies, but it's the same. So the depressed people will ruminate 10 hours. The PTSD people will push away their intrusions, their traumatic images, will try to push them away 10 hours a day. And the anxiety people will worry about the next anxiety attack 10 hours a day. So these are different strategies, but we can have them in one group and actually do therapy with them for 6 weeks in one group, because they quickly see that you might ruminate, I might push thoughts away, you might worry. It's just handling thoughts. It's just thought handling all around.
So is there chicken or egg here? Are anxiety and depression linked? Is it your opinion that they are one and the same, just different sides to the same thing?
That's just byproducts of overthinking, overhandling.
Okay.
So if you worry a lot, you get anxiety. If you ruminate a lot, you feel depressed. So it's just the byproduct of a certain thought handling technique. So if you do pushing away thoughts a lot, you will feel tense and anxiety. If you ruminate a lot, you will feel depressed and low. So it's just what happens when you do a certain thought handling strategy too much.
So I come to you. I have high anxiety. What do you recommend?
I'll go through in slow motion the recent episode to find the trigger thought. When did it happen? Was it from the morning? Did you wake up and you felt how did it happen? And so I would find the trigger point. When was the impact? When did you start feeling bad? And what did you do with that feeling? So what would you do with that thought that came to your head?
So let's say I wake up and I have some anxiety. So let's say I've identified what the thought is. Do I need to identify the trigger? Like something happened?
Well, it's just a starting point. And then you would ask the real big question, the interesting question. What did you do with that thought? That's the important question, because just to have a starting point, it could be anything. What if I get fired? What if I get another panic attack?
Yes.
What if my mom doesn't love me anymore? What if my wife is unfaithful? Whatever.
Yes.
But that's not the important part. It's just to have a starting point. The important question is, what did you do with that thought? Did you leave it alone, or did you do something with it? And then,
that's an interesting question. What did I do with the thought? And what you mean by that is, did I keep thinking about it?
Well, did you leave it alone? It could be there the whole day. Did you just let it hang there? Or did you try to push it away? Or did you just let it hang? Were you lazy towards it? Were you lazy towards the thought? Or did you try to do something with it? Try to plan ahead. It could be a planning process where you plan. So if this happens, then I will do that. If that happens, I will do that.
Okay.
So it's like a planning process.
That's a great question. I think I do 2 or 3 things. I try to plan. So let's say I tried to plan. I also tried to push it away. And I also, let's say I don't know any techniques how to deal with this. It just sat in the back and bothered me all day. Like it just sat there and it just ran in the background. I think that's for my case. It would just run. It would go away, come back, go, come.
Would you let it?
I didn't do much with it. I didn't do much with it. I let it kind of.
Okay, you didn't go into a dialogue with it. You didn't try to discuss with it. You just let it talk without answering it.
You know what? I think I would probably do future planning. I think I would try to okay, if this happens, then B, what's C, right? I think that's what
That's an active process. So
active.
I would ask,
okay.
So how much time do you spend working on planning? Because planning is not leaving it alone and being lazy. That's doing something. So how much time would you spend planning? Is it 10 minutes or is it more hours?
Man, it could be hours.
So if you spend many hours planning, how did that make you feel? What did you feel? Happier, lower, more anxious, less anxious?
Heavier.
What symptoms?
No change in the feeling, just heavy, just a little wore out, just tired.
Okay, so I would then connect the dots here. So do you think it's the trigger thoughts that are talking to you that is draining you the most, or the working on the planning? So is it the existence of the trigger thoughts? Or
it's the thoughts. It's the trigger thoughts. I think it's the trigger thoughts.
Interesting. Yeah. And then I would kind of talk a little bit more and say, so if you didn't work on planning, would you be estranged? If we played with the thought that you didn't plan, you were able to not plan. The thoughts were there, what's going to happen in the future, but you didn't plan on them. They were still hanging there, but you didn't do the planning. Would you be estrained, do you think, if you didn't do the planning?
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Would I be less drained?
But you didn't plan.
Okay.
If you didn't plan an hour.
Oh, I'm digging my own grave, aren't I, Dr. Callesen? I'm digging a hole I'm digging a hole that it's harder, deeper and deeper. So part of me wants to say that what if I felt better by finding a plan B? Because that is possible. Like I was planning. I was like, oh, okay, then if I do B, maybe the worst won't happen. So that's possible. But I just can't tell you if I can find the plan B. But let's say I did. What if I did? Does that matter?
Yeah, so what I hear is a positive belief about the usefulness of planning, because the planning helps me avoid negative thoughts.
I see. You're finding my metacognitive beliefs.
So I can hear that you think there's some usefulness in it. And I can ask you, okay, so do you think it's primarily useful because it gives you some insight and you are ahead of time and you don't get surprises and you don't make mistakes? Or do you think it's a negative thing because it drains you, it gives you these symptoms, you are tired? So do you think...
I think it protects me because I am doing something. I feel like this worry is propelling me to take some action and I'm taking that action. Okay, if this happens, if A happens, I'll do B. If B happens, I'll do C, whatever. Okay. I feel like intellectually that it's helping me.
So you're willing to pay the price of draining and anxiety and energy level, and I mean, it's worth the price, you think?
Probably not. Well, now that you put it that way, I don't know.
You could do an experiment. I mean, you know what you have. What if you realized with experiments that you would get the same action, you could still do things and not do things with less worry? Would that help you?
Okay. So that's the other thing I didn't say, is that in my mind, I'm thinking I should probably postpone the planning till I'm in a calmer state. I don't feel like I make good decisions when I'm hyper emotional anyway. So I try to postpone any big decisions so to the point, I was thinking, is it all that helpful to try to plan when I'm at a high emotional state?
So are you able to wait till tomorrow? I mean, can you?
Well, that's why I'm talking to you. How do I do that?
Yeah, that's uncontrollability. So that's the.
Isn't that a technique? Isn't that one of the techniques you have, or suggestions, right? Of postponing,
waiting for.
And when I read when I read one of those techniques, Dr. Callesen, I was like, how does one do that? Is that? Can someone do that?
First of all, you need to work on uncontrollability. That means that you realize that you are able to leave the thought alone until 5 o'clock. So it's connected to the uncontrollability belief. So in order to do that, to wait until 5 o'clock, you need to believe it's an option, that you have a choice, that you are able to leave a emotional thought alone and wait to work on it and be lazy towards it. So then again, we have a choice situation. Can you choose to be lazy towards a negative thought and emotion? Because it's still there. Lazy doesn't mean emotionless or thoughtless. Lazy just means you're not working on it. So usually I make a metaphor, like there's a dish standing there. You have an unwashed dish, yeah. Then you can look at the dish, the unwashed. Do you call that in the United States? So you look at the plates and all that, and it's dirty, yeah. So you can either fix it, wash your dishes up, or you can just be looking at it. And can you choose if you wash the dishes or look at it? And it's the same here. So you have the thoughts, you have the emotions, they're unplanned. You haven't planned them, you haven't worried on them. Can you choose to do nothing with them? Just look at them and wait to work on them. Would you be able to choose that?
I think so, yes. So this is interesting, because if I'm feeling some heavy negative emotion, depression, anxiety, I feel it in my chest. And I feel these physical sensations pushing me to do something. And then a part of me, my brain is like, what's going on? What is going on? You're saying to feel that, but don't just postpone the interpretation of that.
The answering of it. So
the answering of that.
The phone is ringing. Your mind is saying, "What is this? What is this? What you need to do something with it. You need to do something." So your mind might be talking to you, like the phone ringing, but you don't answer thoughts. So you might still have a lot of thoughts bombarding you. What are you going to do now? Oh my God, you feel very bad. Oh, you have the emotions, you have the physical sensations. So you have the whole impact, but you're instructing yourself to leave it alone. It's there, but you're continue your plan. If you have other plans, you do that. You don't do anything special with it. You just continue your everyday life and wait to do something if it's still there 3 hours later. So it's there and you let it be.
Is this the crux of the therapy? Is the ability to let those thoughts be?
So you practice that, and then at a certain point you realize that 3 hours later it's gone. It's self-regulated, and you don't need to plan and worry and so on. So often by leaving it alone, you will feel this self-regulation. You will experience it on your own body. So the thoughts stop calling you, and the physical sensations kind of slowly self-regulate.
Is it too trite to say the way out is through?
Yeah, the way out is doing nothing.
This is very interesting, Dr. Callesen. So tell me, what do you do then? Do you pick a time and say, okay, at 5 o'clock this afternoon, I'm going to revisit?
Yeah, it's not mandatory. So if it's gone, if it's self-regulated, you don't need to drag it up again and start working on it. So you can choose at 5 o'clock. Okay, do I need to plan now? Maybe it's still there. It's still bombarding you. You can plan. But if it's self-regulated, you don't need to do it. It's not mandatory. You wait until tomorrow.
So are there techniques on how to postpone?
That is the detached mindfulness. So the detached mindfulness is the opposite of doing something with thoughts and feelings. So detached mindfulness is not an empty mind. So you still have 60,000 thoughts a day. A detached mindfulness is not an empty body, so you still have sensations, you still have strong emotions. Detached mindfulness is just observing these thoughts and feelings and sensations without doing something with them. So that is the practice in session and between sessions. So you would practice with neutral thoughts first, like a pink elephant thought or whatever, like a thought that doesn't really trigger any emotion. So I would ask you to kind of have a neutral thought, like a pink elephant thought, and then practice leaving it alone. That's not pushing it away or just observing and doing nothing with that pink elephant thought. And that would be quite easy for you. I think you could do that, right? So it's an easy thing if I ask you to have a thought of a tiger and you just leave it alone, no problem. So the next step would be realizing that you can do this with really uncomfortable thoughts. I mean, independent of how strong the emotion is, how uncomfortable the thought is, how, independent, if it's the most scary horror movie thought or whatever, you can choose to observe and do nothing with it. It doesn't mean it's not there. You have emotions. So I would then ask you to practice on your trigger thoughts in the session. So that would be, oh my God, what if I don't get my deadline? Oh my God, what if I get fired? Whatever trigger thought that you mentioned. And I would kind of throw them at you. And then you need to practice doing nothing with whatever happens inside you. So I would say, first, I'll start with neutral thoughts, pink elephants, tigers, rainforest, whatever. And then you just, you can observe them. And then I would kind of drag in some of those trigger thoughts to make you realize that you can continue observing independent of if the thought doesn't trigger you at all, or if it really triggers you, you get a heartbeat and you get really physical, uncomfortable, but you can still just observe it. And when you could do it in the session, the homework would be practicing in a real trigger situation. So you would expose yourself to something something that makes you trigger, and practice leaving it alone.
This to me sounds like a form of awareness training. It seems to me it's crucial to be aware of what the thoughts are. Is it?
Well, you just need, not really, you really just need to know that you can leave it alone if you want to. So it's more on controllability experiments. So it's like a behavioral experiment testing. Is it possible for me to have thoughts and feelings and do nothing with them? Is it possible? So it's more a behavioral experiment.
Well, then let me ask you this. If I'm not aware what the thoughts are, because this has happened to me before where I'm feeling depressed or anxious, whatever it is, and I can't readily identify what the thought is that I'm feeling. So what do you do in those cases? Just feel it.
Because the important stuff here is, are you able to leave it alone without knowing what the trigger thought is? Can you still choose to leave it without knowing the trigger thought?
So you don't have to know. You don't have to know the trigger thoughts. Okay.
The main part is, can you choose to leave it alone, even if you don't know it? I mean, if you know the trigger thought, if you don't know it, is it a choice for you to wait until 5 o'clock and analyze, why was I triggered or whatever it is? Yeah.
Okay, so that's the crux of my tennis technique that I think is working. I'm acknowledging that I feel something, upset, whatever. I'm acknowledging, but I don't engage with the thinking about it, which that is helping. I'm absolutely finding a new way around the choking and whatever happens in the middle of this game. You're helping me kind of frame what exactly I'm on to here with this. It sounds like it's
what would happen if you didn't do the mantra thing? You have this don't label it. What would happen if you didn't do that?
Here's what's interesting. Yeah, here's what's interesting. When I say feeling no label, it just gives my brain something to think about. It's kind of a door to the thoughts on what I'm feeling. I don't know how, but it's just giving me something to think about versus I just lost that point. I'm playing terribly. Because what happens is I have a feeling and then I started talking to myself as to what's going on. Oh, you're playing lousy. You shouldn't be doing that. Why did you do that? It's this. And as soon as I let the thoughts come in, it's a string. The thoughts are never one. As soon as I let one in, it's a flood.
I'm just curious, does these thoughts happen on themselves, on their own? All these negative thoughts, are they just happening on their own without an effort? Or are these thoughts that you're producing with effort and with, are you hitting yourself in the head?
No, they're pretty automatic.
So what would happen if you let the free flow happen? So if you didn't try to control it with the no label, no emotion, if you didn't try to control it, what would happen? Then these thoughts will come, and what do you think will happen in the long run if you let them come? and you
I'm going
didn't
to
try
find
to
out.
stop.
I'm going to try this. I'm going to find out.
So my point is that if these thoughts are happening on themselves, by themselves, on their own, without an effort, these are just associations. So you do a bad tennis play, and then you have these negative thoughts, and they kind of have their own life, and they're just they have their own life, so on. So in metacognitive therapy, you let these negative thoughts live their own life. You won't try to stop them. You will just let them live out there. I mean, you would just, but you'd be very aware, are these thoughts happening by themselves, or am I doing some work on them? Am I using energy? Am I using any energy, or am I pretty lazy here with the negative thoughts just bombarding me? That's kind of the awareness that you want to be able to know. And then you want to choose the latest one. Even if you have negative thoughts, and you have, they'll live some time, and then they will pass, and then your brain will stop. Like you have a song on your head, it will stop playing in your head.
How do we? So it's training. You have to. I can't do this in the moment. I have to train prior to this happening. Is that right?
It's more, I can do it, but I haven't done it in the right way normally. Normally, people will quite quickly realize I have a choice. I can actually leave it alone if I don't work on it. So
let's talk about that. Sorry. So I have the thought, I'm mindful of it. What's the leaving it alone part? Here's my worry. As soon as I'm aware of it, I'm going to get muddy. I'm going to engage with it. It just seems like it's right there. How do I not fuse with it?
Usually, I would demonstrate with a contrast exercise. So I would usually first start trying to use a lot of energy on it. So what you usually would do, so I would show you what the difference is by like a contrast exercise. So in the first point, we will work a lot with the thought, do what you usually do, maybe even put more effort in. So I would ask you to get the negative thoughts in your mind and then start working on them, what you usually would do. So really spend a lot of energy
contrast.
on what
You're contrasting. Okay.
And then the first 2 minutes, and then you would do no emotion. No.
How do you work yourself up? Work yourself up, right? How do you work? Yeah.
Yeah, you do.
And what's the opposite? And then you go, what's the opposite of that?
Exactly. And then I would do the next 2 minutes, do less, have the negative thoughts again, put them in your mind. Okay, they're there. And now you do less with them. So I would show you so you can have the feeling, so you can feel the difference between spending energy on the thoughts and being more lazy to them.
Is this how, the psychedelics, and there's new modes of therapy for depression and anxiety. Is that how they work, by just helping you physiologically do what you're explaining, just to not engage? Okay, I'm just curious. Yeah,
I'm not sure. Yeah, it maybe blocks the CAS, the cognitive attentional syndrome. I'm not sure. The working on thoughts, the thought handling. Maybe, I don't know.
So is detached mindfulness the same thing as attention training? It's just a different word for it?
That's very different. That's very different. And you would actually only do the attention training with depressed patients. So in my anxiety book, that's not translated to English yet, there's no attention training, because the anxiety people will use the attention training to get rid of emotions, to get calmer. So that's not the same risk with the depressed patients. They don't have this active goal of getting rid of emotions, getting rid of strong emotions. So the attention training would only be for the depressed patients, because they are low in awareness and they don't have any active goals of getting rid of emotions or anything. They just have very, very strong internal focus. So they need to be forced external with attention training. So that's for depressed patients, the attention training. So for the anxiety people, you would practice leaving thoughts alone, like we did now. Like I said, I'm saying some words, neutral words, trigger words, and you would practice leaving it alone until you believe you can. And you do contrast exercises until you believe you can choose if you work on it or not. So that would be more doing nothing exercises with the anxiety people. So you wouldn't introduce attention training with the anxiety, not in the first. No, that would.
So let's talk about depression. What are the depressed people doing differently than those that are suffering from anxiety?
Yeah. Well, they are extreme internal focus all the time, and they have this. The rumination is like a question, why am I like this? Why? And even to the point where they have stopped ruminating, but they just have internal focus without any mental processes. They are just like an internal focus all day long. Yeah. So this internal focus, either maybe they've ruminated so much that their brain is just apathy. There's not even thinking more. They're not even thinking anymore. They're in this internal bubble focus. And that is maintaining the depression, and it could maintain it for years. So in order to kind of block this internal focus, you do attention training where you force their attention external. So you would say, focus all your attention on sounds on your right side, and you would kind of force their attention to the right side outside themselves. Put all your attention to all the sounds you can hear on your left side outside yourself. Even if there's no thoughts, they still need to kind of focus on the area. And by doing that 3 times a day, we have research saying that you can actually pull people from an extremely low, very, very severe depression to a moderate depression, just by pure external training, focus training 3 times a day. That's really impressive.
That is.
So you probably choose that, instead of the electroshock.
How about identifying colors? Oh, that's blue. That's green. That's a red.
So that would be 3 times
okay.
a day. 3 times a day. Well, they've actually done some research, and sounds are the best modality.
Oh, that's interesting.
They tried with colors, they tried with, feeling, they tried, but the sound training.
There's a bird. I hear a plane. Okay, that's interesting.
All this area, sounds in this area. So that's the best way to train it. And that's what you do 3 times a day. And if you do that with severe depressed patients, it could be, in an inward, they're really depressed. You could kind of drag them up from a very, 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 very bad, where they can't even get therapy because you can't talk to them. They're too internal focused, to a moderate level where you can do metacognitive therapy, talk about trigger thoughts, talk about strategies. Then you do the case formulation. What is the starting point? What was the first thought? What did you do with the thought? Did you leave it alone? Did you work on the thought? And how much time did you spend? And how did that make you feel? This whole case formulation, getting the dots together, understanding this in a metacognitive way. So it's not the negative thoughts, but it's all the handling that's maintaining the depression. It is kind of socialization, we call it, where you psychoeducate what the problem is.
Okay. So and by the way, I certainly understand this is a lot more involved in therapy, and I'm certainly encouraging people to seek that therapy, but just get a handle on this and kind of shorthand. But so if I'm majorly depressed, I can lift my mood a bit by external attention awareness, directing my attention. And then if I do that, I can understand or realize as the negative thoughts become conscious as to what's thing, not to engage with them, not to leave them alone, not to try to address them. You can use the other strategies at that point. So then mindfulness meditation, it sounds like you would be pro that. That's a beneficial depending on how you do the mindfulness meditation.
Really. Less is more in metacognitive therapy. And usually when people are using mindfulness, they have a goal of becoming calmer, getting rid of negative tension.
That goal seeking is problematic.
Yeah, they kind of want to regulate something that needs to self-regulate. So sometimes people use mindfulness to regulate something, to get rid of tenseness, negative. You want negative thoughts to pass. I often hear people who do mindfulness saying, well, then I do this, but then the negative thoughts pass. So they have this goal of the thoughts passing, the thoughts moving on. And so that's not really just leaving them be and leaving them hang there. So they have a goal of thoughts moving on, emotions, calmness in my body. And there's a lot of exercises in mindfulness that are very internal, like focusing on your breathing, focusing on your body. So that would kind of prolong these variations in bodily sensations and so on. We wouldn't want more internal focus like they practice in mindfulness. And also mindfulness in itself, it's two different modalities. And
yes,
and usually you just practice mindfulness, but it's more like a chance if you can do it in real life crisis. So you might be able to leave thoughts alone when you do the mindfulness practice, but that doesn't mean you can leave it alone when your boyfriend breaks up with you, when you get fired, when you have strong emotions. That's more chance than, if you can do the same in those situations like you can do in mindfulness, because in mindfulness, you don't work with uncontrollability like we do in metacognitive therapy. So in mindfulness, you wouldn't get questions like, can you leave it alone even if you have strong emotions, even if this happens tomorrow when you are to the exam, can you leave it alone? You don't work on this kind of uncontrollability beliefs like you do in metacognitive therapy.
Is there part of this therapy having people trust the self-regulating aspects of the mind? In other words, getting them to believe or listen, these things are temporary and will pass if you trust that they will.
Yeah, but that's the experience. So when people do their behavioral experiments, waiting until 5 o'clock, practicing leaving thoughts alone, then they come back and say, you know what? it just disappeared. So they will get these self-regulation experiences by these experiments. Yeah.
I think that's probably, it would seem to be one of the larger problems here is people not understanding the self-regulating aspect of the mind, because it almost seems unbelievable.
Very provocative, because let's say you had PTSD for 20 years.
Yes.
And then someone with the cognitive comes and say, well, you kept it going yourself. What? I mean, it's very provocative too. Like you kept this going. The reason why this wound didn't self-heal, self-regulate is because your strategies kept this PTSD going.
Yeah.
That's a bit provocative. You can say that you kept your depression going, you kept your PTSD going. And to a lot of people,
it's more than a bit provocative. It's yeah.
A little bit. The good news is that you can actually stop this prolonged. I mean, you can get out of it. But of course, it's also a bit, yeah. So it's little, yeah. So it's a good news if you really think about it. It's good news, but
it's good news. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. But a part of me is like, it seems too simple. Is there anything that I didn't mention that we should?
I think you had some good questions, and we talked about detached mindfulness, the solution, and a lot of people like the metaphors, are happy with the metaphors, the telephone ringing, you leave it alone.
Yeah, I love that. That was great.
The undone dishwasher, just observing the undone dishes without doing anything with them. So these kind of, what does it mean to do nothing with it? I mean, we have the mosquito metaphor. Can you just let the mosquito bite? I mean, you just let it itch without scratching it, without doing anything with it. So we use some metaphors to describe what is the solution, the metacognitive solution, and to realize it's possible no matter how strong the emotion are.
As we wrap this up, tell me, is it making it inroads here in the US? Is it a matter of more research that needs to be done here, or is it, do you know?
We do a lot of therapy, and we have the online metacognitive groups in English. We do one-to-one therapy with people from Bahamas. We even have those, and we have from the United States and Australia and so on. So more and more people are getting the therapy, and that means that more and more people are asking for it. So psychologists, psychiatrists want to do education in this. And there's an online 2-year program with Professor Adrian Wells, who did the program, so who did metacognitive therapy, who developed it. So you can also get training. You don't need to move to Europe or travel to Europe. So you can take the program online if you're a health anxiety person, or if you're working with health, like a nurse or doctor or whatever.
So give us those resources. Is it your website? And by the way, people in the US can contract with therapists overseas?
Yep. Online, we have a lot of, okay. I mean, under Corona, we got really good.
Everybody did, yeah.
Online. So that's the good thing, yeah.
So point people to your website and your books online. Any other resources?
There's a lot of podcasts. There's a few in English, but most of them are in Danish, unfortunately. Metacognitive podcast where you can hear the therapy happening, but that's in Danish. So I'm afraid there's only the books. Then there's the therapy online groups, and then there's a Facebook website, Live More, Think Less, where you can ask questions and have help from people who've had the therapy and new people who help each other.
Yeah, I'm going to point people to Live More, Think Less. Is there any other books of yours or others that we should recommend?
Not translated. No, I mean, they're translated to German and the Netherlands, but the anxiety book, unfortunately, is not translated to English yet. I have 3 books in total. The depression book, that's translated into English, the anxiety book, and then I have a book for parents who have worried children. So like a parent book.
Oh, that'll be great. Dr. Callesen, thank you so much for coming on. Take care. Thank you again.
Bye-bye.
Well, that's a wrap. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed it, do share it with your friends and on your social platforms. Big thanks to Sam Williams, my audio guy, and the beautiful bumper music you're hearing is Michael Petrovich's Bella Luna. For all my show notes or resource links, visit larryweeks.com, and we will talk again soon.